Hello, we're here with Emily Parzybok, who is here to talk about Yes for Seattle Libraries. Would you like to go ahead with the 5-minute presentation?
Sure. So, like she said, I'm here with Yes Seattle Libraries, which is a renewal for the library levy campaign. So I wanted to give folks just a little bit of context and history so you have a sense of what's going on. In the 90s, we did this Libraries for All program, which was a big expansion of our library system and led to sort of the beautiful functioning system that we have in Seattle today. And then in 2012, we had a levy passage. That was a $123 million levy that we passed in 2012. And that sort of had 4 stated goals: open hours and access for the library, collections, that's the physical and digital materials that we have, tech and online services expansion, and maintenance for levy investments. And so that levy package today compromises about 25% of our library's budget. So a lot of what's happening in the Seattle library system today is reliant on the 2012 levy. And in part that's because after the depression that happened, after the economic recession, we never sort of recovered back a lot of the funding for libraries and the things that we needed to make them run. And so that 2012 levy has really been central to keeping the libraries running in the way that we need for the community. So I wanted to give you guys a sense of what that means. We had 5 million plus visits to the library in 2018. We had 12 million online visits in 2018, 2.5 million internet sessions in 2018, 12 million physical digital items circulated in 2018, 300,000 people attended programs in the libraries in 2018. Just to give you a picture, it's a massive system that's serving a ton of people in a myriad of ways. We know that the library supports kids, teens, adults in our community. It's helping people with career sources and literacy and tech needs. It's helping folks who are in our housing crisis that we're contemporarily having to access the materials they need to get safe housing, to get resources, to get the services they need. So it's this crucial piece of our system that's serving a lot of people. And so in April of 2018, we conducted a survey. 26,000 people responded. And they sort of generally, just the takeaway was that they affirmed the current investments that we have, that they're working, and that how we've invested in the 2012 levy has really been effective at the library system. And then they also gave some feedbacks about just kind of different pieces that they wanted to see more of, things that would help folks who are using the library, the best ways that we could use money in the future. And so using that survey, using the existing 2012 levy and sort of our understanding of the library system, we built a 2019 package for levy renewal. So it's important to note that this levy is relying on a property tax, which I know that we sort of live in an upside down tax code, and we know that there's property tax fatigue here. This would be a renewal of the existing levy, so it is a slightly higher dollar amount per month for folks, but it's a very small raise. So the existing levy is sort of already in place and folks are already being taxed at that rate. So it's important to know that that's a renewal piece. So the new levy is an expansion of hours. We heard from a lot of folks in the community that they needed a little bit more time. This is especially evening hours for programs, community programming, especially for young people and for community groups. Folks stated that they could really use a little extra time, thank you. This also sustains collections and helps us with the shift to digital, which is becoming more and more important over time. Part of the new levy is also a fine-free access to materials, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I thought it would be important to clarify that that doesn't mean that you can throw away materials or never bring them back or things like this. This is simply just removing late fees for folks so that folks have more equity and access to library systems, and we can get more into that as we go. But this is essentially to promote higher usage, to promote equity in the branches, and to make sure that folks can access the library who most need it, irregardless of fines on their things. And then this also sustains the tech funding. It replaces and upgrades existing tech and helps us to make sure that we're up to date and have state-of-the-art materials that folks can use. And then additionally, the council, the mayor put out this proposal, the council added a bit, they added a few more hours, they expanded kids programming, and they also added a community resource specialist, which is sort of like a social worker type position that allows the libraries to be even more effective at serving the populations in the city that, as we all kind of know living here, need a lot more services and help. So essentially in closing, we're renewing the existing levy for a slightly higher dollar amount in order to cover those pieces that I articulated. It's 25% of the library budget today, so I just really want to stress that if we don't pass this levy, what will happen is that 25% of the library funding will just go away. So there will be a massive amount of thank you hours cuts, loss of services, and loss of the library system to the community, which would be really impactful for the millions of people that are visiting the library every day, or every year, I should say. Not quite millions every day, but a lot. So that's essentially the takeaway. I'm happy to answer any questions that you would have, and I've provided you with a one-pager that kind of has some basic access questions, and then also I've provided you with this little sheet that shows kind of an equity question about fines and fees, so that helps give some context for that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
We'll go ahead and open it up to questions. 2-minute answers for these questions.
Sure.
Yes, Jeff.
Can you explain the overdue fines handout that you handed out and what the proposal is and why?
Yeah, so this is from the library. It's not specifically a campaign piece, but I just wanted to give it to you so that you folks had some context. Essentially what we're seeing, which is like, I think we all kind of expect to see this and understand why this might happen, but we're seeing that fines don't impact people across the city uniformly. So we're seeing that people are pretty uniformly late across the city, like everybody forgets to bring in their library books sometimes, and that just happens. But what we're seeing is that in certain communities, that becomes a really big barrier, and folks are getting blocked at higher rates and are not actually having access to the library anymore. So we're seeing that particularly in West Seattle and the South End. We're seeing it particularly in communities of color in the city and in low-income communities in the city. And so there's a big equity question around whether or not fines and fees are effective. Now, I think it's important to stress that some of this is not just, is someone willing to pay the little bit of dollars? It's also like a question of punitive measures and shame, and how often are these people interacting with systems and in what ways, and are they willing to come in knowing they're gonna have a conversation where they're gonna be shamed? And so it's really interesting to see that in cities that have taken away fines, there's actually a higher return rate, so they see improvement at how regularly people return their materials. I think there's concern, and it's understandable, that folks will then just kind of willy-nilly hold onto their materials as long as they like, and that's just not what's been shown. It's actually the case that folks feel a lot of shame about having fines. They don't want to return materials when that's happening, and their rates of return go down. So it's an equity question in that folks are accessing in different ways and are not returning, and therefore not accessing the library as continuously. And those are often the communities that most need the library system. Yeah, of course.
Great, and then Matt.
I'm curious if you know what percentage of the library's budget comes from fees and fines?
You know, I don't know. I would have to ask. That's a good question for a library expert, and I can get back to you guys on that. I do think it's important to note that that is ever shrinking, because as we move towards a more digital system, which is just the reality that will happen, and will continue getting more digital, it does so every year, that is actually just, we don't charge fines and fees on digital materials, right? So it's actually, that's part of the fines question, is it's like, it is a funding source, but it's a really unreliable funding source. Like over time it's decreasing, and so it's not a sustainable revenue source for the library. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, doing two things. How many staff does the library currently have working with the homelessness, with the population experiencing homelessness? And how many people could be potentially added with the passing of this levy?
You know, I would have to, again, ask a librarian. I know who I could ask about that, and I can find out for you. I don't know specifically, although I will say I've been spending a lot of time in libraries lately. I'm making campaign materials, so I'm spending hours of my day sitting in libraries. They're serving, every staff member is serving the homeless population. It's really incredible and moving to witness them in their roles. They're just amazing and supportive. I don't know how many staff members would be added. My understanding is that we're really trying to maintain. And so again, I would have to ask the librarian, but really this is about maintaining the staffing that we have in place and not losing staffing, which would radically happen if we lost this. And there is a social worker brought on, and so there's a budget for that. That's sort of a centralized staff person. I am not aware of a plan to expand library staff people at all the branches, but rather to maintain and make sure that that's being upheld.
Jason, and then Elizabeth.
Yeah.
It mentions here you're updating computers, high-speed internet, Wi-Fi. Could you expand on what that means and what's going to be replaced?
Yeah, I would have to, as far as the actual plan for what devices, etc., I would have to defer again to the librarians, but it's essentially laptops are out of date and no longer running the programs that they need, or some tech things have been broken, were not returned, and they need to replace those. Access to the internet in all the branches just needs
Just
to be
a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Would that be more on the employee side or the user side in the technology upgrading?
My understanding is more on the user side, but I'd like to confirm that.
Okay,
Yeah, my understanding is for users.
sure, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. I work at a homeless shelter, and on the weekends we have everybody leave all day long.
Yeah.
As you expand your tech, I get the regular schedules that you send out.
Yeah.
If you could just let our agencies know, like, that block of time, because we like to send
Oh,
out.
as the library hours
We like
expand.
with the library hours and also the programming and
Sure.
unique programming that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that the library has plans, I mean, assuming hopefully that this levy passes, I think they have plans to help the community understand what the new benefits are.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
I have one. It says on your flyer,
Yeah.
the increase per month is about $3 more per month for the average homeowner.
Correct.
What are we currently paying?
I would have to look at the exact dollar amount. I can pull it up for you while I'm here. I don't have it in front of me.
That's fine.
Yeah,
I was just curious.
yeah.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I have a question. After the 2012 levy, which I supported it really, really heavily, and
Yes.
obviously I went to the library a lot.
Yeah.
There was a marketing and branding kind of scandal,
Uh-huh.
and it was really disappointing to those of us who had worked really hard for the levy and accepted a lot of disappointments in terms of things that we had thought that perhaps that levy was going to bring to us. And
Sure.
And it was like multiple millions of dollars with the marketing and branding thing that they did scrap, and they did like basically say sorry. And I'm wondering if there's any further that the library is gonna go to make sure that they don't have that kind of problem again,
Yeah.
because it's not a marketing and branding issue the library has.
Yeah, unfortunately I don't have context on that. I'm, as you all know, I'm sort of a hack, and so I'm working on the campaign, but don't have multi-years of experience. I do know that as I've talked to folks in the coalition that have worked on this, there are many folks that were there in 2012, and I know there's a lot of lessons learned and a lot of thoughtfulness that they've taken from that. So I really believe in their ability to sort of like learn from that experience and move forward. But that said, that's sort of in their bucket and not mine.
Are you hearing questions about the 2012 levy and the marketing and branding?
Honestly, I have not heard many, but it sounds like you've interacted with it more closely than many folks that I'm talking to, so you might have more experience. Yeah.
I have another. So can you talk a little bit more about the kids programming?
Yeah. There's so much programming, so it's hard to even begin to talk about it. I've been interacting with a few things just that I can share stories about, and then there's such extensive programming, so I can't get into all of it. But aside from just a lot of reading groups and a lot of shared groups, everyone I've spoken to so far, like everybody has a story about taking their kid and their grandkid, and so there's a lot of opportunities for families to bring their kids in to read. In particular, there's opportunities also for families that are multilingual, or maybe the parents don't speak English, for them to bring kids to reading groups and interact with literacy in that way. So that's a really rich place that is happening. Team Read in the city did a video for us for our campaign, and they do a bunch of literacy programs for the city and are just an amazing group of people that work at branches. And so that is one piece that's happening. There's also a lot of work happening with homeless teens up in the U District. There's some work happening, thank you, down south. I've been really amazed too about, I always think of libraries and kids as reading group and literacy, which are obviously really important pieces. But there's also things like music mixing. So we have folks down at Rainier Beach who are using the library branch for music mixing and creative avenues. There's spoken word poets down there that are using sound mixing to record their materials, and so that stuff is really rich and beautiful. And I was really unaware myself of sort of the teen access, but there's a lot of that happening. That's a brief snapshot. There is a lot more programming happening than that.
Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, would you like to go ahead and do a 30-second wrap-up?
Wait.
Yeah, this one's important, you gotta hold me to it.
Alright, whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Essentially, as I've said, this is not a question of a new levy, it's a question of renewing the existing one. We know that we would lose 25% of our library funding if we don't renew it, which makes it really urgent that we renew this levy and ensure continued programming. I do understand that sometimes there are concerns about property tax, though we have this existing levy in place and it's already providing really important services to the community. The library system serves everyone in our community, from children to elders, and it's a really important piece of so many folks' communities, from those who speak English to those who are new to this area to those who are building small businesses and everyone in between. So please support us. I'm looking forward to that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.